Good evening. Let's wait another minute for everyone to join. Okay. Well, I'd like to welcome you to the Scotch Plains Family Public Schools Virtual Community Forum. We're just over a week away from the September 17th bond referendum. We're glad to have another opportunity to share details with you about the proposal and to answer your questions before the vote. I am Dr. Joan Mass, Superintendent of Schools. I will be your moderator tonight, and I will want to thank the panelists for joining us to share their expertise on the referendum. Before we get started, I would like to go over a couple of housekeeping items. We will start with presentation and then accept questions at the end. After the presentation, please type your question in the Q&A function. Your questions will be directed to the appropriate panelist. We will get as many questions as possible before ending at 8:30 p.m. This session is being recorded and will be posted on our bond referendum website for anyone who was not able to join tonight or who wants to rewatch it later. That site is spfk12.org/future. The site is also an excellent source for information about the September 17th vote. The website has frequently asked questions, an overview of the projects, voting information, and more. To start the evening, I'd like to introduce Board of Education President Evan Murray. Mr. Murray, take it away.
Thank you, Dr. Mass. Good evening, everybody. And thank you for joining this evening. So I am my daughter, I have a daughter at the high school currently. My children have been through the Scotch Plains schools. While this is an exciting moment for the community of Scotch Plains and Fanwood, the other board members and I recognize that any district improvement plan that impacts your family's budget is a huge risk. But we understand that you may still have questions, and we're hopefully here to help you make an informed decision. So I know throughout the process, I've had many people come up to me and have questions. I've had questions of my own, but we've been able to definitely rely on the team here with you this evening. So please definitely ask your questions and make your voice heard for the September 17th vote.
Thanks, Mr. Murray. I would now like to talk about what led our district to this point. We started this process because our towns are attracting more and more residents, and in turn, our school district is growing. Enrollment was up over 150 students last year, and the district has been over capacity for years. A demographic study projected continued enrollment growth due to 3 factors: young families moving in, a rising birth rate, and new housing developments being built. The study estimated an additional 500 or more students in the next 5 years. After considering the needs of our growing student population and the goals of our district strategic plan, we decided to conduct a community survey and focus groups last fall to guide the district's next steps. We heard from the community a desire to add instructional space, to manage class sizes, and address student population growth. Preserving our district's academic excellence ranked high on our community responses. We also heard that upgrades to infrastructure, especially air conditioning, are a priority for residents. Let me now introduce Christopher Jones, the district's business administrator, to talk more about how a bond referendum provides the added benefit of state aid.
Thanks, Dr. Mass. Bond referendum allows us to generate upfront funding to improve our schools and see upgrades in just a few years. The cost of the projects gets spread over time, similar to the way a homeowner uses a loan for home repairs and improvements. The number one reason to do a bond referendum is to access specific kind of state aid that is only available to schools with voter-approved referendum. This is money that taxpayers have already paid to the state that can only be brought back to invest in SPF through an approved referendum. If both questions pass, the district would receive $14.9 million in state aid. Again, this is money that only comes from voter approval of the referendum.
When you head to the polls on September 17th or fill out your mail-in ballot in advance, you will see 2 questions on the ballot. I would like to introduce our district architect, Greg Somjan, who will share information about the various options the district analyzed and the questions that will appear on the ballot. Greg?
Good evening, everybody. My name is Greg Somjan. I am with Perrette Somjan Architects, and we are the architects working with the district on this and a variety of other projects. When the district engaged us, they had already undertaken some analysis about the options as it relates to the growth of the student population within the district. There was exploration of the various classroom additions at 5 of the schools. And when those were explored, some budgets were prepared by another professional. When we were brought on board, we looked at those, and we also looked at some of the sites. And just by way of background, the concepts that were explored as it relates to the student population component were 2 classrooms at Brunner, 2 classrooms at Evergreen, 2 classrooms at Cole, 2 classrooms at School 1, and then 6 classrooms at Terrell. Conceptually, these are certainly options, and in fact, they were looked at. When we started to analyze the pros and the cons, and when we based our recommendations and discussions with the district on our experiences, ultimately, the direction that was taken was to pursue the purchase of LeGrand. And here is some of the background that led us there. First off, the cost of the modular classrooms were just one expense when you took into consideration the costs of connecting utilities to the existing buildings to make those modular classrooms effective. The costs started to become prohibitive. When you look at projects like this, there are also economies of scale that ultimately have to be taken into account. When you build 2 classrooms at 4 schools and 6 at another, you lose those economies of scale on smaller projects. One of the key decisions in exploring LeGrand was the fact that the disruption of 5 schools within the district for the student body would be significant when you're constructing on site. The summer window that everyone likes to take advantage of for construction projects would not be sufficient for these kinds of projects, and so construction would run during the school year. Ultimately, one of the deciding factors was this unique opportunity that had the LeGrand Elementary School building come up for sale. Typically, finding property to construct new is very, very difficult, but finding a building that is a school was certainly very, very rare. In our experience, we've had that experience once before, and this is another example where there are just benefits to taking that approach. When you add population to the individual buildings where the classrooms were proposed, you also further impact the common areas like the multi-purpose room or the gymnasiums, because obviously you're increasing the student population and there's some limited site areas on these properties that would make expanding those common areas very, very challenging. Not to mention that traffic and parking continue to be a concern currently, so increasing classrooms at those, again, while possible, didn't seem to be the right decision when the building became available and when that opportunity presented itself. One last point to make: while 14 classrooms were part of the study that was undertaken previously, the LeGrand Elementary School afforded the district an opportunity to incorporate 28 elementary school classrooms, 4 pre-K classrooms, 4 special ed classrooms, 2 occupational therapy and physical therapy spaces, plus the areas like a gymnasium and a cafeteria multi-purpose space to support those students. So kind of as a high-level summary, that's ultimately how the district got to the point of pursuing the LeGrand after exploring those other options. What you see on the screen currently is a conceptual drawing of the building. On the right-hand side, you can see the building footprint in relationship to the site. You can see that there are classrooms and music rooms. There are media center space. There's a gymnasium. On the upper floors, which are the 2 plans to the left, there are additional classrooms, special ed spaces, English as a second language spaces, and obviously the requisite circulation and restrooms. So the ultimate goal was the need for more classrooms, and this option really presented that opportunity. What you're looking at now is the rendering that we prepared from the LeGrand Avenue Elementary School on the LeGrand Avenue side. And again, the goal was to try to make it residential in nature, try to break down the scale of the elevation, and ultimately by doing that with smaller components, pitched roofs, we believe that we've created a much more attractive building that accommodates the program needs of the school. This is the street side or the south side, and ultimately it's a little bit set back from the main street, so you would ultimately see this as you came onto the property.
Thank you, Greg. So the opening of LeGrand Elementary School would move our district toward a neighborhood school model. You may be wondering, what does that mean? Where will my child attend school if the vote passes? These are good questions, so let me be as clear as possible. We don't know yet which students will attend each school, but we do know that the Board of Education and the leadership team are all committed to making this transition as smooth as possible for students and their families. At the start of the 27-28 school year, the 5th grade would move to the elementary schools, eliminating the need for trailers at the middle schools. Pre-K through fifth grade students would attend an elementary school based on the population density around each school and how close the student lives. I know that some of you may have looked at a map that was given as an example in our demographic study, but it was only an example. It was created just to show separating our community into regions that would then be sending kids to a near school, but it wasn't formed by utilizing the student density data. So again, just an example. This demographic study was conducted by an outside firm and is not finalized. There are still many factors that could change before the LeGrand Elementary School would open. We know that it is difficult not to have all the answers yet. We also know that if no action is taken and enrollment continues to grow as is projected, the schools that many of you love and value will be very different. We could see larger class sizes and less space. Tonight, we have McGinn Elementary School Principal, Dr. Sasha Slocum, and Nettingham Principal, Dr. Jocelyn Dumaresque. Could you both please tell us more about what the passage of question 1 of the referendum would mean for your schools and our entire district? Dr. Slocum?
Yes, thank you, Dr. Mass, and thank you to everyone who's joining us tonight. So the passage of the referendum would enable us to continue to serve our increased population with the same quality learning environment that is expected from SPF for all schools. So that it just provides us the ability to maintain the class sizes that our community expects in order for us to provide the high quality education that we are providing now. In addition, the additional space would enable us to get dedicated music rooms. So right now our music classes are on carts, which is very challenging for our music teachers in the bigger schools especially, but everywhere. Also, we'd have dedicated art rooms and even innovation spaces. We'd have a lot more opportunities to use our spaces to serve our students. Also, our small group spaces, which are overused right now in our buildings. So last year at McGinn, for example, we were up to 551 students, which is 90 students more than I started with 14 years ago. We're now in our 15th year. We're maintaining that. We're at 545, 546. So we're maintaining this high number of students, and our classroom space is absolutely maximized. Spanish is on a cart. Music is on a cart, and our multi-purpose room, because of our large numbers, is used for lunches, of course, but we've had to make 3 full lunches as opposed to 2 full lunches when I started, and we also had kindergarten separate. They were able to eat on their own, but they are not eating on their own anymore. This does cut into our specials time. So our schedule, which is always an interesting puzzle, is even more of a puzzle when we want to make sure that use of the multi-purpose room is leaves the custodians enough time to clean, leaves our kids enough time to safely go to and from. We also have instrumental music 3 times a week in our multi-purpose room. So these spaces get a lot of use, which is wonderful. It just becomes more and more of a challenge as we have more students. Our sections, as they increase in number, our 3rd and 4th grade classes are now at 24 and 25. This also becomes more challenging for specialists and classroom teachers, of course, but also specialists, especially if they're traveling. Not this year right now, but last year we actually asked the PTA for general school supplies. Our families are so generous; they've been providing more school supplies to start the school year. I mentioned the lunches, which is challenging, especially when they are sometimes imbalanced. So last year, for example, we had 4th grade and kindergarten together, which had over 220 kids in one of our lunches, and it was just too many. I had to ask some kids to eat in classrooms at different parts of the year. This year, our 4th grade is smaller, but next year it won't be. So they do fit in the room at about 200 kids, and it's going really well so far. Next year we have 5 sections of third grade, so we expect that number to go right back up again. Lunch coverage is also a big challenge. We are budgeted to have 15 lunch aides. We need more lunch aides. So anybody out there who's interested in being a lunch aide, that would be great. And we are asking our teachers to do lunch duty every day, which again puts additional pressure on them in their already busy day. And we have an increased number of needs in our buildings since COVID. We also have, we want to provide the best quality for experience for our students with IEPs and 504s. We want our small group rooms to be very accommodating for them. And they're just getting more and more packed and overused. And sometimes we're moving groups around, and that's not the way that we want to make sure that we can continue to provide a very consistent learning environment for our students. We have an increased need of SEL needs, so that puts pressure on our counseling and our counseling department, and also on our teachers as well. But we are doing our best, and we thank you for listening to these ideas.
And some of what Dr. Slocum outlined, we're seeing similar concerns here at Nettingham. And I love, Dr. Slocum, that you mentioned lunchtime, because I always like to joke that who doesn't want to spend lunch with 250, 6th, 7th, and 8th graders? But that's only one class at a time. So certainly if you are interested in being a lunch aide, middle school also needs you. So we are looking at increased class sizes as well at Nettingham. And we do maintain a slightly higher class sizes at the middle school level, but we are seeing some of our electives and exploratories really creep up past 30. Our core classes are getting a little bit close to 30 as well, which is a bit on the bigger side. PE classes in our gyms, we always use shared spaces. It is, double classes in one gym, and we always want to maintain the highest level of safety in our PE classes. And when they double up, that does pose a concern. We, just like Dr. Slocum shared, we use all available space at Nettingham: hallways, conference rooms. These have been turned into offices and instructional spaces. And as you'll hear from Dr. Millett in a little bit, very often music lessons occur in suboptimal spaces, so the cafeteria or other areas. And then you'll also hear from Dr. Rabimba shortly about how special education is impacted. We do have 4, we call them cottages, but they are temporary trailers in the back of Nettingham. They are, though, at the end of their lifespan, and they are often maintained and repaired. They do have some leaks and some spots that are suboptimal. And these are also not connected to the school. So students, 6th graders mostly, have to exit the school to go to class in them, which poses a safety concern. And it's not ideal in inclement weather, especially. And every classroom at Nettingham is used pretty much all day. Most classes are shared by multiple staff members, and we have a handful of teachers who do have to move multiple times throughout the day, which is disruptive to instruction and to creating a physical space that promotes learning. Thank you, Dr. Mast, and thank you to everybody for listening.
So we also have with us tonight Dr. Wayne Millett, District Supervisor of Fine Arts and Physical Education, to explain more about how the referendum would impact students. Wayne?
Thank you so much, Dr. Mast, and thank you so much to everyone who is here as well, logging on. Really just the biggest impact that this referendum would have is that it would have really on our general music classes. Right now, 4 out of the 5 elementary music classrooms, right now they don't have a dedicated music classroom. So that means students are either learning within their regular classrooms where the teacher has to go there on a cart, and many times they don't get the full general music experience. So they have to come with the keyboard, or they might even have not all the instruments that are available if there was a dedicated music classroom. Sometimes they're even in the multi-purpose room, which sometimes goes right up against, which would be actually right during the lunchtime. There's tables being moved down for lunch. And so it's just a distraction. And it's really just not optimal for students to have that great music experience, which I know we love and value here in Scotch Plains and Fanwood. Another thing that would be great is that the art classes will be provided more classroom space. Right now, some of them, they do share like an office space with the music teachers. And many times they don't even have adequate storage space, but being able to have storage space for the art supplies would really allow the students to really engage into even higher levels of art making. So that's another thing that really would be great, to just have an experience with art and music both being the beneficiary of more space. And really with the idea of more space is that even when we have general instrumental music lessons, sometimes there are lessons that occur in smaller, tighter office space, or even in the hallways, which is just not optimal with distractions and things that are happening. So the benefit of having more classroom space for music lessons and general music classrooms would be an overall great benefit, and even into our middle school experience as well, for those teachers that sometimes have to teach lessons in the gym, or I'm sorry, teach lessons in the cafeteria or even in the hallways. Having a dedicated music classroom will be a huge benefit to both of those, and ultimately allow for continuity within our music program. If students they start an instrumental program in 4th grade, and then they make a transition to 5th grade, but if they can keep with 4th and 5th grade for the same teacher in the same school, we feel this will be highly beneficial for our student population for continuity in the music programs.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So now I would also like to introduce our Director of Special Services, Dr. Lisa Rabimbis, who will tell us how the referendum will impact our special services program.
Thank you, Dr. Mast. Good evening, everyone. Each year, the school district provides special education programming and related services to our students with disabilities through their individualized education plans. Programs in their IEPs may be pull-out replacement, in-class support, and/or self-contained classes. Speech therapy, occupational therapy, physical therapy, and counseling are related services we also provide within the district. These programs and services require adequate spaces in each of our 8 schools to ensure we meet the needs of the growing population we serve. Currently, not having specialized spaces requires the staff to use rooms creatively and juggle locations each year. In some schools, classroom spaces are used for multiple purposes at one time, or available spaces such as the stage and offices are used to provide speech, OT, PT, and counseling. With the addition of LeGrand School, rooms will be available there and in our current schools for specialized spaces for these programs and services. This is especially important as our special education population continues to increase in enrollment and in the intensity of services the students require. We must be able to house the students within these classes and sessions and the adults who teach them and support them. With more space, we can continue to meet the needs of the students we serve and potentially and hopefully expand programs and services to maintain students within the district in their local communities.
Now I'd like to introduce you to Betsy Dolan, a traffic engineer who also happens to live here. She will share her insight on the project from a traffic perspective. Betsy?
Hi, good evening. As introduced, I'm Betsy Dolan with Dolan and Dean Consulting. We specialize in traffic and permitting. And as also introduced, I live in Fanwood. I grew up in Fanwood. I went through the school system, Scotch Plains, Fanwood, including LeGrand School. I grew up on LeGrand Avenue. So I know the area well, and I'm happy to be studying it for the potential reuse of LeGrand as part of the Scotch Plains Fanwood School District. We did prepare an initial traffic study to identify potential traffic volumes that would come and go during the morning drop-off period, the afternoon pickup period. We also met with the New Jersey Department of Transportation because they have jurisdiction over South Avenue, which is State Route 28. We talked with them about the enrollment, the potential movements, and the possible permitting if the referendum is passed. That would be something our office would handle. And through that permitting process, we would be looking at safety enhancements, including pedestrian crossings. We're also looking at the speed limit and possible reductions along South Avenue. We also met with Union County because LeGrand Avenue is a county road. And as was shown on one of the exhibits, we're looking to introduce a driveway on LeGrand Avenue. And the county was receptive to that, subject to, of course, formal analysis and engineering design. And again, if the referendum passes, then our office would be working with the site engineer on the necessary analyses and design to safely introduce a driveway at that location. And again, similar to the DOT, the county had talked about pedestrian safety, signage, striping, and so forth. And so the future traffic studies would include a serious evaluation of the safety improvements to both frontages to make sure that vehicles and pedestrians can all be accommodated safely, not only at the school, but on the approaches to the school. So we will look forward to hopefully doing more analyses and meeting with these agencies to design the access and approaches, and also look at possible, as I said, speed limit reductions, as well as other regulatory signage, so that we have the appropriate approaches to the school and not conflicting traffic and pedestrian movements.
Thank you. Now let's hear about the second question that will be on the ballot. Greg, can you take that?
I can. So the district, as part of this proposal, has gone and evaluated some other priorities that, given the chance to present to the community, felt were appropriate. The list on the screen shows you the individual schools and the improvements that are being proposed. To summarize them, there are heating, ventilation, and air conditioning improvements. Where air conditioning does not exist, there is a proposal to add it. The electrical systems within the building will be upgraded, not just to accommodate the air conditioning load to older buildings that typically were not designed to have that kind of electrical capacity, but also to try to accommodate some additional outlets and things in various classrooms. As you can appreciate, as technology has evolved over the decades, the aging buildings that were designed quite some time ago need to respond to that technology and the electrical systems supporting them. And then also fire alarms in some of the schools. Again, the specifics are listed on your screen, where they too will be upgraded. As a point of information, the district is using capital reserve monies to undertake one fire alarm project currently, because that need was greater and a little more urgent. So that was undertaken as part of a capital reserve project. But I'm sure at some point, Mr. Jones will talk to you about, while there is some capital reserve available, the amount of money needed to make all these improvements cannot be supported by just a capital reserve. And not to mention that using capital reserve does not get the district the benefit of the debt service aid that the district is offering, or excuse me, that the district is getting based on the state's analysis.
Thank you, Greg. So now, Dr. Slocum, will you give more details about the air conditioning?
Yes, absolutely. Were the referendum to pass, there would be many benefits, including students and staff who deal with allergies and have to sit in the hotter classrooms, but also everyone who comes to use our school facilities from the outside also would benefit from air conditioning in all of the spaces. We've already had experiences where schools were closed last year at one point for the heat. We fortunately started the school year with nice cool temperatures, but we're going late into June at the end of this year. So, some of our rooms are air conditioned. Some of our big spaces, like the multipurpose room, are air conditioned, but most of our classrooms are not air conditioned. Only some of them are. And when it's super hot, some of our classrooms reach, in the 90s in the classrooms, and they're so hot and heavy for the day that the classes move to cooler settings. They move to the library, they'll move to the multipurpose room, and they rotate, which, it just disrupts the learning environment for our children and for our staff. So we would welcome the addition of air conditioning. Thank you.
Thank you. So keep in mind that these two questions are contingent, meaning question one, must pass for question 2 to pass. The district structured the ballot in this way to address the highest priority that impacts the entire district: current and future enrollment growth at the elementary and middle schools and maintaining class sizes. We have heard from staff, parents, students that air conditioning is also a main concern. We know that the learning environments at the start and end of the school year can be quite uncomfortable without air conditioning. Next, we'll hear again from Mr. Jones about the cost of these projects. The State Department of Education thoroughly reviewed our bond proposal to determine final state aid figures, and we want to make sure everyone is aware of the tax impact. Christopher?
Thank you, Dr. Mass. I'd like to thank everyone for sharing this great overview of the project. Makes it exciting for what's going to come to SPF. The district collaborated with a team of architectural and financial advisors to determine the project's outline and referendum would cost approximately $81 million for the grand purchase and renovation and expansion, and $34 million for the HVAC, electrical systems, and fire alarm systems. This brings the total to $115 million. SPF would receive the most state aid if voters approve both questions. That's $3.5 million in state aid for question 1 and $11.4 million in state aid for the second question. So in total, SPF stands to receive $14.9 million in state funding. I also wanted to address one question that we have been asked. Why not use the district's operating budget to pay for these projects? SPF's annual budget covers the cost of day-to-day operations such as salaries, supplies, utilities, and educational programs. There's simply not enough room in the budget for the purchase and renovation of a new school, HVAC repairs and replacements, electrical repairs, and fire alarm systems, HVAC expansion, electrical repairs, and fire alarm systems. And even if there was, the district would miss out on receiving state aid to cover a portion of the cost. We also have been asked, why not build a new school? Regardless of whether the district builds a new school or renovates, expands 330 South Ave, we would need land, which is currently at a premium in Scotch Plains and Fanwood. Developers are quickly eyeing properties that come on the market, and this opportunity to purchase 330 South Avenue would slip by if the referendum doesn't pass. Property owner was also willing to hold the property for us since we cannot purchase the property without generating funds through a referendum. Here to tell us more about our district's financial advisor, Sherry Tracy, and our bond counsel, Everett Johnson. Sherry?
Hi, thank you, and good evening, everyone. As Mr. Jones just went through the two questions and the tax impact, I just want to elaborate a little bit more. When the district holds a bond referendum, it's borrowing money by selling bonds in the market. In this case, we're looking at selling those bonds over a 30-year term. So the tax impacts we're talking about go into effect over the 30-year term of the bonds. The bonds may be issued all at once. For a project of this size, it's often common to maybe split them into two sales, and that we would work together with the district, of course, and the architects to see when those funds were needed, as far as making a recommendation whether all the funds would be borrowed at once or if they may be split over a couple of years as the money's needed. And again, the tax impact would be in for the 30-year term. If both questions are successful, both questions pass, a homeowner in Scotch Plains with the average home would pay, average assessed value home would pay about $47 per month if, again, both questions pass. The owner of a home assessed at Fanwood's average would pay about $40 per month. And if you're wondering if you will pay more or less than that amount, you can look up your assessed value at NewJerseyPropertyRecords.com. Follow the instructions on the website posted here, and then you can determine your impact. Because again, these are just based on the average assessed values in each community, but the assessed values are very different, and they're very different from equalized value. So it's and market value. So an assessed value is not what your home would sell for. It's currently what the taxes are based on. And again, both communities are very different. So it's important to take a look at that.
Thank you, Sherry. My name is Everett Johnson. I am a shareholder with the law firm of Lentz, Goldman & Spitzer. We are bond counsel to the school district. And I want to tag along with Sherry's comments. the state aid the district will receive is only available with a voter-approved bond referendum. All New Jersey taxpayers contribute through state taxes, meaning the state aid is allocated annually in the state budget through primarily income taxes, which most residents pay. However, the district will only benefit from state aid if the referendum is approved next week. In terms of how the referendum process will work and the benefits of the bond issue, the bonds will be sold through a competitive bidding process to ensure the best deal for the district. So assuming we're able to receive an affirmative vote from the residents for questions 1 or questions 1 and 2, the board would then move forward to approve a resolution authorizing the issuance of bonds. Then they will work with myself, my firm, Sherry's firm, to set a date to sell the bonds in the future. We would then draft notice of sale that would advertise the fact that the bonds will be sold on a specific date to underwriters that are in the business of purchasing bonds for school districts. On that date, underwriters will then submit their bids to purchase the bonds, and their bids will consist of an interest rate. And thereby, the lowest bidder will be awarded the bonds. Assuming that each bidder's bid was conforming to the statute, we will go to the lowest bidder. The benefit of that is that we're going to, by setting a date, notifying the public and investment bankers and underwriters that actually buy bonds, we can ensure that we're getting the best rate on that particular date. It's different. All the bidders receive the same information. They receive information about the district, the project, debt service, information about Fanwood and Scotch Plains. They all have the same information, and they would then be able to submit their best interest rate to the district, and we would then move forward, once again, award the bonds to the district, to the underwriter submitting the lowest bid. Also, it's important that I want to point out that we cannot spend more on the projects than what is going to be authorized in the bond referendum. So if a project is over budget, then we'll have to pull money from other projects. We cannot spend money more than what's approved next week. And I think that is something that's a question that may arise later on. I want to make sure we point that out. I will now turn it back over to Joan.
Okay, thank you, Everett.
Thank you.
So we really appreciate you sharing that information so the residents can make an informed decision on September 17th. Dr. McGarry, would you please also explain how the opening of LeGrand Elementary School would impact staffing and operational costs?
Absolutely. As Everett pointed out, the bonding can only pay for what we're asking for the voters to pay for. And so it can't be used for things like staffing and other operational costs in the future. So opening a new elementary school, though, does come with some additional costs to hire teachers and other staff, such as nurse, custodians, office personnel. For this reason, if the referendum passes and the school is purchased, expanded, and renovated, the district will need to hold a second ballot question at some point in either 2025 or 2026 to raise funds to be able to support that staffing. And I think Mr. Jones is going to talk a little bit about what that's projected to be.
Thank you. Early estimates, we believe it would be about a 1 to 2% tax increase. And I saw a question come up about this, and I figured I'd address it now. The way that's calculated is that's all of the custodians, security, overhead type of salaries that would be in there. And just to remember that we do already have 5th grade teachers, so not every single staff member would be new, and so that's why it's around 1 to 2%.
Okay, good. So thank you for explaining that. This ends the presentation portion of tonight's forum. As a reminder, we are recording this forum so the information can be shared with people who were not able to join tonight. The link for the recording will be posted on the bond referendum website. So please spread the word for people who were unable to attend. All right, it looks like we have a number of questions. So remember, if you have not already entered your question, now is a good time to do so. And I'm going to just start going through the questions and having some of our panelists answer them. So, did the district's long-range facility plan have these elements of the referendum in it? When was the LRFP completed? Greg, can you talk to that?
I can. So obviously, the long-range facility plan did not include the acquisition and renovation of LeGrand because the long-range facility plan is typically updated every 5 years. And so the district last updated it several years ago. We updated the long-range facility plan as part of the Department of Education requirement on June 3rd. And the upgrades to the LRFP included the LeGrand acquisition, the LeGrand improvements, and any of the other miscellaneous projects that might not have been in the long-range facility plan previously.
Okay. Thank you. What is driving the projected increase in school enrollment? Christopher?
Yes, we get this question a lot. There's really three main reasons. The first one is residents moving into town with young kids. Second reason is an increasing birth rate. And the third reason is the new developments. So how do we know that it's people moving into town? Going into last year, first grade, second grade, third grade, and fourth grade, as they moved up, every one of those grades increased. Let's say there was 100 students in first grade. When they went to second grade, it all of a sudden went up to 120 students. So you know those are residents that are moving into town. They weren't, born and then went up, aged really quickly. So, and in addition, in terms of the birth rate, I know in Sandwood, it's the highest. The past 2 years have been the highest they've had since 2007. So that's the main drivers.
Thank you. If we don't purchase and renovate the school, do we expect the owners will likely sell it to be developed into condos or apartments, making the overcrowding even worse? Christopher?
Yeah, I think that's a potential possibility. It's out of our control how that would work, but I would say that it's a pretty good assumption that it will get purchased and there will be a development in there.
Another question we hear frequently, and Christopher, I'm going to bunt it back to you again. Why are questions 1 and 2 contingent?
Yeah, I think we briefly mentioned it, but I think it's worth coming up talking to again. I think the main driver really was the survey. And the survey, the number one thing we heard was the classroom sizes. We also heard air conditioning. And the second consideration was when we were going through and looking at this project, we saw that the price tag was high. The building, 81 million, 34 million for air conditioning. And so instead of having one question of 115 million, we wanted to give the community an option to break up the cost into 2 questions.
Okay, thank you. Sherry, if the bond issue passes, will the tax increase be permanent or only for a fixed period of time?
So no, it will not be permanent. It's only in effect for the length of the bonds. So we have been looking at a 30-year bond for this issue, given the size and the useful life of the projects. So the tax increase would be in effect for the 30 years.
Okay. Back to you, Christopher. How much would the new housing development that have pilot agreements contribute to the school debt from the referendum?
As a school district, we don't have the right to manage the pilot agreements. We're not involved in the pilot agreements. We do not receive the funds. And so, the question is, how much would they contribute? They would not contribute at this time.
Thank you. We were able to expand classrooms to go to full-day kindergarten a few years ago without issuing bonds at all. isn't it fair to say that some portion of the funding in this bond issue is to catch up to benefits that we've already realized? This sounds like good fiscal planning to me. Christopher, could you speak to that?
Yeah, I would say, the administration that's in place now is a different team that did that. But I would say that they were able to expand, kindergarten without going to the referendum. So, if you wanted to try to think of it that way, you could. But I think that another thing to think about is, since COVID happened, I think the people's lifestyles, working hybrid and things of that nature have completely changed from when they expanded kindergarten years ago. So you could say it's a portion of it is being realized as benefits to make sure, but the other way to think about it is really the environment that we're dealing with in terms of where people live and how they work, where they live and where they work has changed.
Thank you. And just another point to note on the kindergarten topic, the Cranford referendum was about Cranford moving to full-day kindergarten. The Westfield plans to go out for a referendum is about full-day kindergarten. So Scotch Plains, in one perspective, has been ahead without going out for a referendum to have full-day kindergarten. If we were to change that, because certainly full-day kindergarten consumes space, we would be going backwards. And we probably would be very alone in the state as a place that did not have full-day kindergarten. So I've heard some buzz around that, and I just wanted to address it. Will my child have an option to finish at their current school rather than moving to a new school? So I'll take this one. The plan when the LeGrand School is ready, if the referendum passes, we are going to start planning, very, very quickly on creating those neighborhood schools, following the data of that student density. And if we're able to, let students kind of retire in the school that they are in rather than disrupting, moving them in 4th or 5th grade, we would do that. But at this point, we don't know how many seats are available. We are going to put together, a task force that would include parents and administrators, to study that question. So it's still one of those questions that we don't know, but it's something that we would consider if possible. How will the district handle financing for the roof repairs that are no longer part of this referendum? Christopher?
Yeah, there's a couple of ways we can handle it. The first thing we're looking at is we spent some additional funds on some, once we took the question off, we did spend additional funds on a roof scanning to understand, to be able to rank our roofs more effectively. The second thing we did was in last year's budget, I did increase the maintenance for roofs. There's a couple things you can do. You can replace the whole section of the roof, or you can patch it and repair it as you go. So we've increased the budget for patching and repairing. And once our scanning process is done, we will use our capital reserve to slowly do the roofs over time. It won't be as fast, and it will take away money for other capital projects in terms of nice to have. But we'll be prudent on starting the process this summer.
The next question is about air conditioning. Isn't air conditioning a must-have as evidenced by the extreme heat at the start and end of the school year? Dr. Slocum?
Yes. That's the easy answer. I think that I think we'd all agree that what's best for our kids and our staff is to have a comfortable environment to learn in. And when we do have extreme heat, one thing I didn't mention before, we not only is the learning disrupted during the day, but when we have lunch and recess, we don't go out for recess when the heat hits a certain temperature. And Then the kids are inside then, but we still have the hot classrooms. We do have the kids then walk through the air conditioned spaces in the school to cool down. But the impact is truly evidenced all day for the students, so, and for the staff. So we would love to have air conditioning everywhere.
Thank you. For question number 1, how much is the purchase price of LeGrand and the renovation expansion costs? Christopher?
Yeah, so the purchase price is 10.6 million, which is based on an appraisal we completed before we went to an agreement. And the rest of the remaining costs are related to renovations and expansion. And they're about 50-50, I would say, for the rest of the remaining costs.
Why would SPF have to purchase a building they already own? Christopher?
Yeah, so the district used to own this building and a few others, and they sold them, I believe, in the early 80s, and they sold them because there was a baby boom, enrollment went down, and so they sold off the buildings. So we don't own it. There's a simple question. We don't own the building, and so now we are purchasing it.
Why are there 4 pre-K classrooms in LeGrand if pre-K is not yet required? Lisa, can you speak to that, the requirement for pre-K and how we currently create the classes?
Sure. So preschool is required for children with disabilities, and there are a diverse number of disabilities that our students have. And many of our students require general education peers to be role models for them in their classrooms in order for our special education students to be in the least restrictive environment. So providing a pre-K program within the district like we currently have, where parents sign up for pre-K for their general education students, allows us to provide an inclusive environment for our students with special needs. If we did not have pre-K, we would then have to expend funds to send our students with disabilities to outside programs.
And currently pre-K is placed where we have space?
Correct. We have pre-K in 4 of our 5 elementary schools. And our students at McGinn attend other elementary schools in order to have access to preschool.
So Greg, do you know the answer to this? If 4 classes are designated for pre-K, could those classrooms be used for, let's say, kindergarten or grade 1? Could they be repurposed for a different grade?
So conceptually, yes, because I think the pre-K and kindergarten spaces, if I'm remembering correctly, are larger in size from a square footage perspective. So those arguably could be repurposed for general classrooms if at some point that was decided.
Right. And they also usually, by state statute, come with bathrooms. Is that correct?
So in the ideal design scenario, that is correct. And I don't have the drawing in front of me because it's in the slide deck, but I believe that was the approach that we took.
Okay. So Greg, can you talk to any health concerns in our application regarding the school and its location near a gas station?
So I know this question had come up maybe a week or 2 ago. There is a website that I believe we were directed to that referenced a variety of zoning analyses throughout the country, and the requirements varied. The research that we did, the Fanwood zoning mentions 200 feet. And at the end of the day, the realities are that the gas stations and the building are existing. This is not a new development that we are building near a gas station. It's an existing building. And we did, as part of our environmental due diligence, investigate a variety of conditions on the site. And so post-referendum, we will be managing those and dealing with those. And obviously, I think this doesn't need to be stated, but I will. Certainly the health and safety of the students is paramount. And the building was used as a school up until the owner agreed to sell it to the district. And so, you know, there's nothing here that is more important than the health and safety of the kids. And so that will continue to be looked at post-referendum to address any concerns. But right now, the gas stations that exist are across South Ave and further down. And, you know, right now, based on the information that we have, there is no requirement, especially based on the existing conditions as opposed to new development.
Thank you. The next question is one that comes up, you know, even, you know, annually. Why are the Scotch Plains and Fanwood residents expected to pay different amounts? Sherry, can you speak to that?
Sure. So the formula for deriving the tax impact of the referendum is the exact same one that the school district's budget is based on, and it comes directly from the state. So it's a formula based on the equalized value, essentially market values in the community. So the state uses a formula that takes total market values, and this time it's market, not assessed, values in each community, and then it's proportioned that way. And again, those numbers are given to Mr. Jones and to the administration every single year, and it does fluctuate year to year, of course, as property values change or new properties come online. That helps make the base grow a little bit bigger. More people paying into it brings the rate down a little too. So, but those are based directly from a formula from the state.
Thank you.
Sure.
What demographic studies do you have to project how long the class sizes will continue to rise? Christopher?
Yeah, so for demographic study, they can only go out 5 years, as long as they can go out, because things that, you know, as you go out, there's more probabilities to the numbers. And that's on our website and then the slide we showed tonight as well with the enrollment going up.
Okay. Then what is the current SPF student teacher ratio and how does it compare to ratios around New Jersey? So Sasha, can you talk about the ratios at McGinn, and then Robert, maybe you could follow up with ratios around New Jersey since you've been around.
Sure, I'd be happy to. I don't know off the top of my head. I would need to actually do math with my staff and then, you know, per students, but it doesn't work exactly like that. So the way that it's not just a direct relationship between the number of teachers and the number of students, because some students receive special services and they're in small classes. They might have, you know, 5 to 8 students in their small class with the teacher, and they might have an aide in the class as well. Whereas, you know, as I mentioned earlier, my 3rd and 4th grade classes have 24 and 25 students with 1 teacher. Some classes have 2 teachers for language arts and math for the 24 and 25 because of special service support. And then in the lower grades, it's closer to 20 to 22 students per teacher. And again, in students where there is a special education teacher who comes in for language arts and math for part of the day, that would be 2 teachers to those students. So it depends how you look at it. The direct, I don't know offhand the direct student teacher ratio if you're looking at just the number of students relative to the number of teachers.
I think if you looked at across the 3rd grade, you know, and thank you for explaining the complexity of it, but in your 3rd grade, what is the size of your 3rd grade classes?
They have 24 and 25 in my 3rd classes.
And then there's a classroom teacher, and it might be a special ed teacher in those classes as well, right?
There could be, yes, but most of the classes, it's 1 teacher, yes.
Okay, thank you. Robert, what are your thoughts on our ratios?
So, you know, I think the class size ratio of number of students in a classroom really varies quite a bit across the state, and it really depends upon the value that communities place upon the size of classes and what they know the impact of class size has upon students. So I think, we're definitely at the upper end of things as it relates to third grade. We heard Dr. Dumaresque speak to some even larger class sizes at the middle school level. And our numbers at the primary grades are creeping up too, and really trying to keep those in the 20 to 22 range is where we should be. Based upon research and what it says about class sizes.
Dr. D, can you speak to your class sizes, the ratio at Nettingham?
Yeah, absolutely. So very similar pictures than what Dr. McGarry, Dr. Slocum have shared. So our typical class size, I would say in like a 7th or 8th grade science or social studies room is close to 25. I really try to keep it under that. And then when you look at things like our exploratories or specials, those classes really are around 30. And, we make those classes a little bit bigger so we can try to keep our course classes down because as Dr. McGarry, that's what suggested, that's what research says that we need to do. So we do kind of sacrifice that a little bit by bumping up the numbers in exploratories. But when you look at the ratio in terms of like special education, even our smaller classes are getting bigger. So we have our pull-out replacement classes, which are by nature smaller classes that are getting larger year by year because we have new families moving in, new needs moving in. So where you would have seen a teacher ratio in what we again call our resource room or pull-out replacement class, which might have been 5 students to 1 teacher based on IEP needs. Now you're going to see something like 8 or 9, maybe even 10 students per class.
Thank you. Is it projected that more new state mandated housing developments will be built in the coming years? Do you know about this, Christopher?
I would say we're not, we don't get involved in how many housing developments are coming in the future outside of, the next few years. We do know that we do know what Fanwood has announced so far, and we know what Scotch Plains has announced so far. And one of the major developments did open on 22. We know there's another one that's open that's near Terrell, but the apartments have not been opened yet. So for those developments, even though it looks like it's open, it's not. The vast majority of units where we expect to get students out of that development have not opened yet. They're not going to open until October and then all the way through the end of this year, similar to how the other development opened earlier. So what we have in our demographer report is only those 5 years. So I know there's lots of talk of additional mandates coming down the pipeline, but we're not privy to that legislation, as it's not our mandate.
So on that same theme, how are the new apartment buildings in Scotch Plains and Fanwood contributing to the enrollment growth? And are they receiving tax breaks?
So I would say yes. So I'll talk to the one development at on 22, one side apartments. This year we had 53 students coming from that development, and those are all new to the district, obviously. We expect additional enrollment as the newer developments open up. And in addition to those larger developments, there's also some what called bolt-on smaller apartments going in as well. That's required by the state, of course. Those are required by the state. I think all communities across New Jersey, especially in this area, are having all these units go in, every town locally. Now, in terms of taxes of what they pay and what they don't pay, I think to get back to my previous answer on the pilot funding, the municipality maintains that relationship and the tax dollars that are collected from those developments.
Why can't we expand our new current elementary schools instead of adding a new school? Greg, I think you spoke to that earlier, but can you revisit that question?
Sure. So we did, and I'm happy to share it again. So there was an analysis done in 21-22. There were approximately 14 classrooms over five schools. And there was a combination of 2 classrooms at 4 and then 6 classrooms at Terrell. And ultimately, there were several reasons that the decision was made to go in the direction of LeGrand, including but not limited to the economies of scale, the disruption to the students during construction, the availability of LeGrand, which is a very unique circumstance that allowed us to pursue, which again doesn't happen very often. There are some site-related limitations at some of the facilities, including floodplain and utility easements. So, so as not to be redundant, that was kind of a higher level summary, but those are the reasons that there was an exploration of additional classrooms. They totaled about 14 classrooms, half of what LeGrand is ultimately giving the district to address the student population.
Thank you. So Betsy, there are no sidewalks on the LeGrand side of the building. Will they be added?
Well, that's something that would have to be coordinated with the county and the municipality. But the sidewalk system, what we're looking to do is control any pedestrian crossing movements at the Beach Avenue intersection. That's where it historically was, and that's where there is an existing crosswalk. Discussions with county focused on the, I'll say, beefing up of that sidewalk system with visual cues and also signage. But what I would also say is that the draw from that portion of the borough is probably limited because as you reach further along eastward on LeGrand Avenue, you're approaching Laurel and then you're approaching South Avenue. So the number of students who might conceivably walk along westbound LeGrand Avenue on the north side would be somewhat limited. So I don't know the right-of-way availability there. I don't know. I will say in our preliminary conversations with the county, there was no suggestion or request that that be implemented. So if they could not be provided, then it would be up to us to route the children and any pedestrians in a safe manner to the school. But I would think it would be limited to those students along the LeGrand Avenue section between the school and Laurel and South, and potentially along Beach.
Thank you. So if question 1 passes, will the items in question 2 be able to be completed while school is out, or will some of the work spill into the school year? What do you think, Greg?
Yeah, these projects are just so extensive that the 6 to 8 week window that is typically associated with the summer is just not possible to execute these projects. So typically, depending on the project type, oftentimes for projects that are a little more manageable in size, like these kinds of infrastructure projects, work can happen over the summer, and then work can happen second shift. So when the kids are out, 2:30, 3 o'clock, the workers will work in areas that they have access to. And when the kids come back in the morning, there's no actual construction activity. We've done that successfully on a variety of projects, and that would be part of our tactical approach to these projects as well.
Thank you. Has the district considered an energy savings improvement plan to fund the HVAC improvement and electrical upgrades? Christopher?
Yes, short answer is yes. We did investigate that. It's not available for the electrical upgrades. We had a consultant look at the district, and they gave us an estimate of how much they think we would get out of the energy and savings improvement plan, and the dollar amount was not enough, even close to cover this. So if we, when we move forward with an energy and savings improvement plan, most likely the funds would be used to upgrade our current HVAC system that we have now. So the HVAC that we have right now, air conditioning system, has to be replaced. And so those funds would help us to replace some of our aging rooftop units over time, which would then potentially free up some funding for some other items, including the roofs.
The next question is, what is the impact of enrollment growth on the high school? The good news is the high school is able to hold the growing population. The high school uses spaces differently than the elementary, for example, where in an elementary school, a teacher is fixed to a classroom for the entire day, where the high school teachers teach for a period, and there are some periods where classrooms aren't being used. So there's ways to be more efficient with high school space. Additionally, Scotch Plains, in the height of its enrollment, had additional elementary schools, which in the 80s, the district understandably sold. But the high school was built for its maximum enrollment, and we're not there. So there is room at the high school. The next question, we touched upon it before, but I'm going to, I have heard that the referendum if it doesn't pass, we will go back to half-day kindergarten to free up space. That could hurt my property values. Can you confirm that we will not revert to half-day kindergarten? So it is true that by going from half-day kindergarten to full-day kindergarten, we really doubled the spaces that we needed. If we were desperate for space, if we were forced to do that, that would be something that would have to be considered, but that would really be, a desperate move. We would really be all out of space at that point to have to go backwards, as I said earlier. When will the AC work be completed? What does your crystal ball say on that one, Greg?
So once the referendum passes, there is still a lot of planning that has to take place, because the documents that we submitted to the Department of Education are by no means finalized documents. We still have a second round of approvals from the Department of Ed. So the direct answer to the question is that we will sit post-referendum with the facilities team, the individual schools. We'll talk about schedules of implementation, and we will create a schedule that minimizes disruption with the buildings, that has the projects planned out, and they would probably come online at different times. Part of the discussions will be long lead items, which still exist in the electrical world and the mechanical world, unfortunately. But ultimately, it's not going to be flip of a switch and they all come on or they all go, all come on or not. We will, again, sit down post-referendum and talk about an implementation plan that starts to address the various schedules and to get these things starting to come online.
Why is the district getting less state aid for the more pressing portion of the project, increasing classroom space? Greg?
The simple answer is it's the way that the state calculates the funding. Plain and simple. They have a calculation that they use. It was somewhat created in 2000 when the grants and the debt service aid were made available to all the schools, with the goal of an equitable distribution being made. A district would only be eligible for aid associated with additional classrooms if it has what they called unhoused students. We have unhoused students in this case. So from a funding perspective, just to put things in perspective, whether you built 2 classrooms at an elementary school or you built the LeGrand project, well, obviously the LeGrand project is more significant because you're getting 30 plus classrooms, and in my example, you'd get 2. The way they calculate the debt service aid for that is the same. It's based on a square foot price that is in statute, and that if you have unhoused students, which again doesn't mean your children are, being taught in the street, but the calculation based on the size of the building ultimately identifies a number, and then there is a calculation on which the state will ultimately grant that debt service aid. So this is purely a state identified calculation. And just to put things in perspective, compared to the infrastructure projects in question 2, where they give us the 30%, 34% of the eligible projects based on our cost estimate. And because the cost of construction, certainly over the last few years, has skyrocketed, there's greater value in the aid for the HVAC or the electrical improvements or the fire alarms than there is in a construction of a new classroom.
Okay. Are these bonds standalone or combined with other municipal bonding? Sherry?
Yeah, so these would just be issued standalone. So there would be Scotch Plains Fanwood School District is its own issuer in the market. So the bonds would not be combined with, say, any of the township bonds, the borough bonds. That would be those are all issued separately. So this would be a standalone issue for Scotch Plains Fanwood Board of Education.
Dr. McGarry, would LeGrand need its own principal?
Absolutely. The number of teachers that are projected to work there would need somebody leading them, evaluating them, scheduling the school, doing all the things that a principal does. So yes.
Christopher, what is our September 24 enrollment number?
So, enrollment, we're up about 10 or 15 this year, but like I mentioned before, there's going to be approximately 500 units opening up over the next year. And so we expect to see our increase come in later in the year.
Is the reason for the deposit to hold the property to the end of the year and hold vote in September to give us time to sell bonds, receive the funds, and pay the developer? What do you think about that, Christopher?
Yeah, I think that we have to, so the bonds, in talking with Sherry today, take 60 days to issue, and then you actually have your close. So we have to, it's why we have to have the September vote in order to close the process of buying the building before the end of the year.
And if you don't mind me just kind of piggybacking on that, I think it's also critical for the timing of state aid as well, because the state imposes a cutoff of 12/31 for applying debt service in the upcoming fiscal year. So in order to receive debt service aid in the 25-26 year, which would be the first year that the district would feel the impact of the bonds, where you'd actually see that tax increase would go in 25-26 school year. In order to receive aid, debt service aid, that in that budget, the state just requires the bonds to be issued and closed by 12/31 of this year. And that just has to do with the timing mechanism of them creating their own budget and making sure they're allocating the proper funds that are needed. If the district were to issue bonds after that time, like in January or February, they would not receive aid in the 25-26 year, but the aid wouldn't be lost. It would just be doubled up the following year. So the timing with the September referendum is actually really kind of perfect when it comes to aligning to receiving aid in the first year, in the 25-26 year. The November and December referendum dates make it difficult to issue the bonds really before the end of the year. And then so you're kind of just playing catch up that following year. The tax impact sometimes can do like, up a little and then dips down when you get the double aid the next year and then back up again. So the September, in addition to having the funds for closing on the building, becomes an important date.
Thank you. So Christopher, can you talk about how much money we have in capital reserve and how that money is earmarked for other projects?
Sorry, guys. So yeah, we have about 10 million we try to keep in there, and we have the long range.
You just went out.
So about 10 million we keep in there, and that'll be planned after the referendum, and it'll be mostly the roof upgrade.
Thank you. And Everett, can you tell us if we can transfer money between these two projects and ballot questions?
Yes, so if you look at the ballot question, it actually has a sentence in it that says that the bonds, that the amounts authorized can be transferred amongst the projects. So yes, they can be transferred amongst the projects, but the total amount cannot exceed the amount in the referendum.
Okay. I think that might be it. Oh, I found some more. How many students can the LeGrand Elementary School hold, Greg?
So the capacity of the school was calculated at about, I think, just over 500, based on a circumstance that exists on South Avenue with regard to the speed limit. The actual school building has the ability to house over 700. And so the 500 capacity can be increased, and I'm going to ask Betsy to correct me if I misstate anything, but the based on the street access, based on calculations from the state and a variety of factors, the increase can go up to 596 based on the new access on LeGrand. And if during our conversations with the state and the municipality, the speed limit in front of the building can be reduced, then we can increase it to 720, which is the actual capacity that is calculated within the Department of Education applications as a maximum capacity for the building. So Betsy, did I misstate anything?
No, you got it right. It's based on, if you're familiar with the site, you being the general public out there, there's a 35-mile-per-hour sign right at the site driveway on South Avenue. If we get that to 30, then we can increase the capacity upwards of 720, as stated by Greg.
And the building itself, however, based on the classrooms and the capacity calculations that the state uses, is already designed for the maximum capacity, with the expectation that there shouldn't be too much objection to reducing the speed limit.
Thank you. How are we going to ensure that the cost of the construction projects doesn't go over the referendum amount? Everett? Or Sherry?
I don't think you can control, we can't ensure the costs won't go above the referendum amount, because obviously the cost is controlled by other market factors outside of the bond issue. But what we can control is not spending more than the amount approved in referendum. So to the extent that costs exceed the amounts approved, as I mentioned earlier, we will probably have to be tracked from doing some of the projects in the schools, which we hope not to do. And going back to the question you asked earlier, maybe some projects will come over budget and some will be under budget, and therefore the ability to switch monies around different projects should be helpful if some projects come in over but others come in under.
Dr. Mass, can I just add to that?
Yes.
So within our budgets to the state, we have contingencies. We're also carrying market escalation. We recognize that after the referendum is successful, we still have a lot of work to do, and projects will be bid over the course of time. So the Department of Education requires that, and a best practice is that. So we do have contingencies built in, and if those contingencies are not needed, then they will be returned to the district, or as Everett mentioned, it's very likely that some projects based on a variety of market conditions may come in a little bit higher, while others will come in a little bit lower. And so to be able to aggregate the overall referendum based on projects being put together based on the contingencies that we have in the applications, the goal is to execute exactly as being promised to the community based on no crystal ball, unfortunately, and not knowing necessarily what the future will bring. But there are contingency plans that are in the budgeting to help mitigate that.
Okay, thank you. Are there current bonds that are due to expire, Christopher?
No, we currently have no debt in the district, which, yeah, is rare and unusual. But yeah, right now we have no debt.
Thank you. What are the interest rates for 30-year bonding? Can you refinance in the future, Sherry?
Yes, so you can refinance in the future. These bonds would have a call provision in them, meaning it would be the school district's option to refinance if they could save in the future. And we've modeled these based on a pretty conservative rate. We used a 4.4% interest rate in the analysis. Currently, 30-year bonds would be selling for under 4%, probably somewhere 380s, 390s, kind of right in that range right now, especially for a district like Scotch Plains Fanwood. So we do have some kind of contingency built in the rate. It's very likely that the rates would actually come in lower. And again, with that call provision, that just allows in the future, especially as we go forward. And the district's done this with their last bond referendum in 2010, we refinanced the previous referendum, and the district was able to save money by refinancing at a lower rate. That's the most recent issue, the last issue that was really paid off in 2022.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Christopher, one more time, we still have some questions about the reason for the contingency of the two questions. Can you please clarify why question 1 is a priority for the district and tied to question 2?
Yeah, question 1, in terms of academic learning, the community said that was number 1, keeping the classroom sizes where they're at right now and not letting them increase. And really, it's really about flexibility for the community. And so instead of putting it into one question, which would be a $115 million question, we broke it up into 2 for, just in case voters, the dollar amount is too high and you just want to do just the building. And that's really the simple sort of answer for it.
And so, I've heard you say this, that the need for space is the priority. The need for air conditioning, as Dr. Slocum said, is also very important to have a positive and comfortable learning environment, but the need for space was the most important. Okay. All right, seeing that it's 8:33, we are going to end our forum. If we are not able to get to your questions tonight, please email your questions to future@spfk12.org, and you will get an immediate, you will get a response within 24 hours. Visit our website, spfk12.org/future for more, including frequently asked questions, projects, and voting information. The recording will be posted here as well. Mr. Murray, could you give us a final send-off, please?
Sure. So I know we all, this is an investment that, we have to weigh for, our towns, and most importantly, our children. So I'm excited how this is going to build the future for SPF. Your vote does matter, so please make sure you go out and vote. The polls are open from 2 to 8 on September 17th. Thank you and have a great evening.
Okay, well said, Mr. Murray, and thank you to the Scotch Plains and Fanwood communities for joining us tonight and learning about the bond referendum. And thank you to our panelists for sharing your insights. Have a good night, everyone.